After all, when you live in a world of terrorists and madmen, when every bad thing that happens on every corner of the earth is in your living room by the end of the day, a world where your nearest neighbor is potentially a foreign enemy, rights begin to look like a vulnerability. Ladies and gentlemen, I disagree. If our strategy to defend against each new threat is to do away with the very values that differentiated us from them, the right from the wrong, we have protected nothing, and we have won even less. And what about when a law is passed, but the law itself should be disobeyed? The father of the idea of American civil disobedience, an American philosopher named Henry David Thoreau, argued that this is a duty that rests upon the shoulders of every individual. He said, it is not desirable to cultivate a respect for the law so much as for the right. The only obligation which I have a right to assume is to do at any time what I think right. Law, on its own, never made men a whit more just. And by means of their respect for that law, even the well-disposed are daily made agents of injustice. More simply, this is to say, the law is no substitute for conscience. Saying so does not make us anarchists. It makes us realists. Certainly, one need not look very, very far back in history to find examples of abuse, inhumanity, that were clearly, facially immoral. And yet, we would do well to remember that from the violent institutions of slavery, genocide, the disenfranchisement of women, to modern prohibitions as to who and how one can love another, these policies are more often than not entirely legal. I'm here to say tonight that the support of a majority can never transform a wrong into a right, and that dispossessing a minority of basic liberties, or perhaps entire populations of their privacy, does not become permissible, even if it is popular. What this means, ladies and gentlemen, although this may not be reassuring, although this may not be a comfortable idea, is that sometimes the only moral choice is to break the law. And while we face challenges, right, you all know better than I whose hands rest on the lever of power today. If reform is to be had, if progress is to be made once again, it will not be granted. It will not be given to us as a gift. Frederick Douglass said famously, "Power concedes nothing without a demand." It will be made in the face of resistance and abuse from the powerful and the privileged, because these are those who need rights the least. These are those who are impacted by abuses the least. They are sheltered not only from the consequences of their decisions, they're sheltered from our laws. They are sheltered from the necessity of rights. This is not a challenge that we asked for. Nobody woke up and said, please give me a problem to solve. But this is a challenge for our generation nonetheless. When you look at the news, when you look at the rhetoric that's being thrown around, when you see the rise of ultra-nationalism, racialized violence, discrimination, the abuse of minorities, the closing of our civil discourse, it's really easy to get worried, right? It's very easy to feel that things are slipping out of control. Perhaps there's nothing we can do, right? And to think, what is this going to do to me? What is this going to do to my friends? What is going to happen to the people who are sitting next to me in this auditorium, who don't have those same installations, who don't have those same privileges? But I'm here to say, don't be afraid. Because if there's one thing you can learn from me, whether you think I'm a good guy, whether you think I'm a bad guy, whether you think I am the worst person that's appeared throughout history, The lesson we can draw from this is that sometime, whether it comes to our courts, whether it comes to our Congress, whether it comes to our president, our White House, who signed into law reforms that he wants opposed because we had new facts, one voice is enough to change the world. And I think it should be yours. We see again and again, whether it's just the guy's tax returns or his policies, his ideas for where the country should be headed, he says, I'm not going to talk about my plans, I'm not going to talk about my intentions. He's sort of forgetting who he works for, which is us. This is fundamentally a dangerous thing. We already see the systemic response. I have hope for those who are still in government, right? Again, like when I worked at NSA, when I worked at CIA, I got the same thing everybody else did. I got the emails that popped in my inbox. They go to everybody in the workforce whenever there's some controversy that says politely, remember, you're not supposed to be talking to the press, which is a little bit of an implicit threat there, but I didn't take it that way at the time. But they also told you how to think about it. They said, here's sort of the organization's position on it. Here's our representation of the facts. And it's very likely that this is happening right now, right? Whether we're talking about ICE and Border Patrol, whether we're talking about people in the military, there's a lot of messaging that's happening internally. But just because the executive branch of government changes, just because the legislative branch of government changes, just because the courts themselves change, doesn't mean that everyone else in the country changed. We have political obligations in the United States, people who go in and work for these organizations that are not to politics, right? There have been people who said, one of the early criticisms of me was, oh, this guy broke an oath. He promised not to tell secrets. That's not actually how it works. There is no oath of secrecy in the United States. There's a classified non-disclosure agreement, a civil agreement, which is a standard government form. But there's also the actual oath, the oath of service, which is to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Not the president, not Congress, not anything else. The Constitution of the United States against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. Now, this is not to say the president's a domestic enemy, right? I'm not going to take a position on that. But we have values, constitutional values, that are increasingly being called into question, often with flimsy or non-existent justifications for that. And it raises the question of what protects them? The Constitution is never going to jump off the table and protect your rights, right? It's paper and ink at the end of the day. What gives it power is our willingness to go to bat for it. And I would say in this case with these leaks, we are seeing people who are risking serious consequences to do what one would hope, would believe, would be their sincere belief that it is the best way to keep that oath. Now, how that works out in the end, it's too early to say. Is this a mistake? Are they criminal lawbreakers who did no good and only caused harm? We'll see, right? But the fact that we see these leaks, the fact that we see people willing to stand up and risk revelation, consequences, persecution, and we don't see this in countries like China, Russia, even France and Germany, is an indication to me that the American spirit has not gone, it has not disappeared, it has not vanished. It is under pressure, but I think that pressure is more likely to reawaken it than it is to destroy it. Criticisms that sometimes people are too polite to bring up, which is basically, did I place lives at risk? The one about WikiLeaks, right, is did they place lives at risk? And how does this calculus work out, right? Should we try to protect this, or should we just ignore it? Should we just say, oh, these guys signed up for a dangerous job? Of course, for me, I think we do have some responsibility, and that's why I went about disclosure the way I did. The number of documents that I published, not everybody knows this, is 0. I could have uploaded these things online. I could have sent them to WikiLeaks, but I didn't for a specific reason.